Welcome to another episode of the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast. This week we are discussing truck driver behavior and consistency and how it impacts you fleet owners. All right, we have on the show this week Roger Longbotham and Warkentin of Fleetmetrica. We're talking about the study that they had done. They commissioned University of British Columbia to do a study, and they used a lot of telemetrics data in the study, and we're talking about the revelations that come out of the study. And stick around to the end of the podcast where I share with you how you can get a copy of the white paper where Roger and Ward have really cut down on the whole study and just give you the highlights in a short white paper. So stick around to the end for that. Let's get on with the episode. Roger, Ward, welcome. Roger, can you do a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yes, I have a PhD in statistics and have been working as a data scientist for many years, Amazon and Microsoft, and now I have a small consulting business in statistics and data science.
And we got to get into statistics because this is going to be kind of neat. Ward, Mr. Ward, can you throw a little introduction in?
Yes, certainly. Hi, I'm Ward Warkentin. I am the owner of Fleetmetrica. We're a data analytics company for the transportation market. So I'm also coming from that perspective as well.
Well, and for John and I and the audience, hang in there because this is going to be a really interesting show. We're not going to be talking a lot about data and analytics and stuff, but we've got a really interesting topic. And part of it starts with consistency. Who would like to address this one, Roger or Ward? What is driving consistency? What does driving consistency mean, and how is that measured? Roger, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So in a non-technical sense, consistency means when someone is inconsistency is when someone's outside of their normal operating range. So I don't know. I've been skiing a bit with my grandchildren lately, and I got to thinking about, how important it is to ski within your whatever limits are that you have for yourself. If you're a beginner, then you've got certain limits. If you're more advanced, then of course your limits are different. And if you go outside those limits, especially in the upper end, you can get into trouble and even have an accident. That's the way I think of it for driving consistency is we all have, I guess, different abilities as drivers, but when we get outside of those, our comfort zone, if you will, then that's when you're likely to have an accident. And that's what our study showed, is that those inconsistencies, or when you get outside of that zone where you're consistent, is when you're more likely to have an accident.
That's cool. Ward, Roger just mentioned a study. Do you want to introduce the study a little bit?
Yeah, so Roger's referring to the study at the UBC, University of British Columbia, where we, with involvement of some of our customers, we were able to analyze data, telematics data, to understand what impact it has on accidents. And this is actually the third study we've done with UBC, and we really got some results from this latest study. And the main results were that inconsistency is a key factor in predicting the risk of accidents, and so that's what we're referring to here.
All right, you got to repeat that. The key result or the key study finding was
that inconsistent driving behavior is a key factor in predicting the risk of accidents. And it included factors such as, speeding, harsh braking, and even inconsistency in fuel efficiency had had detected that drivers are at a higher risk of getting in an accident.
So this has got nothing to do with, say, a roadside violation. This is all data captured through telematics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
This is
right.
proactive. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Roger.
Cool.
Right, and we also found that speeding in and of itself was a predictor of or increased likelihood of accidents, but that's well known. The main new finding is that inconsistency in speeding, harsh braking, fuel efficiency are all additional and new predictors of probability of accidents.
Right. So we've always known for a long time that speeding is a cause of crashes and whatnot. This is now putting meaning behind it to be able to say we can actually put some numbers to it to predict when that speeding is going to cause us some trouble.
Right. Yes. So the study did that. It actually quantified that relationship between speeding and accidents, as well as inconsistency in speeding, harsh braking, and fuel efficiency. So how much each of those contributed to an increased probability of an accident.
Yeah, and in previous studies that we had done with UBC, we actually looked specifically at speeding and validated results that had been already shown, which is higher or elevated levels of speeding are at a higher risk. So it just validated what was already shown in the market in the past.
Right.
Now, if I'm a speeder, I just want a little clarification on consistency or inconsistency. If I'm constantly a speeder, I'm being very consistent in one definition, right? So,
yes,
but that's not what we're talking about. We're not saying that constant speeders are safer drivers than those ones who only speed every now and again, right?
exactly. Go ahead, Roger.
Well, yes. So what we're saying is the speeding in and of itself is increasing your likelihood of an accident. But if you are speeding more than usual, or if you're somebody who doesn't normally speed, maybe you're, an 85-year-old grandmother or something, and now you're speeding. Well, that increases the likelihood of an accident quite a bit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. So inconsistency is the main finding.
The new finding, right?
Okay.
Yes.
And Ward, for you, how did the study come about?
Well, customers came to us and said, "Hey, are we measuring the right things? Are we looking at things that really relate to risk and accidents?" And so this naturally led us to understanding what we were measuring and drawing on the resources of the universities to help us make more sense of this data in a more substantial way.
So it's kind of new measurements. Johnny, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so now we can actually get some tangible results. So how can these benefit the fleets then? These results that we're going to get, what can we utilize these results with?
Well, I'd like to jump in with that response and let Roger jump in there. But one of the big things about consistency is now we can give feedback to everyone in the fleet before they become a high-risk driver. Why wait to have a driver that gets in an accident? We may have to actually dismiss that driver, or it may result in something worse. And so there's an opportunity now to monitor the consistency of drivers at whatever performance or level they're at. And this, the benefit is now, hey, why do I have to wait for someone to call me and tell me I'm doing something wrong? I could monitor my own performance and be safer.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, did you have a comment?
No, I mean, that's exactly right. The whole purpose of this study, well, first of all, was to determine the relationships And if there is a relationship, and we found there was, which truthfully kind of surprised me. Ward had an intuition about it and thought, yeah, this would be a good thing to look at. And I didn't know, so we included it. That's what we do is we try the variables that are available to us, the data we have, and sometimes we have to use that data in different ways to find the relationship that's important. And Ward had this idea, which is great and worked out really well. But the purpose of how this can be used, I think Ward said, is monitoring, either self-monitoring or by management of the fleets to make sure that their drivers are being safe. And I guess also an insurance company could use it to if that data were shared with them, of course, to help monitor and maybe even reduce insurance rates.
Roger, I want to jump in there on a comment about my intuition. There was more than my intuition. This approach to monitoring processes has been around for many years. I was actually first introduced to it working at Ford Motor Company, and the whole North American automobile industry changed their whole mindset around consistency. It was no longer we're making parts to meet the engineering specification, what the engineers require. It was now we're going to give the operator a tool to monitor their performance and to be as consistent as they can be. And I was blown away when I saw that in action. And in fact, there's a study. It's a well-known another study that you can Google called Ford Transmissions Quality Study. And the video actually talks about this change in mindset and the importance of moving away from just meeting parts to spec to being consistent. And so, I can't take the credit, Roger, for my intuitiveness there. It's enabled the automotive industry to compete globally, and I think that it has a real potential for the trucking industry to embrace this methodology to significantly reduce the risk of accidents, and even better now that we have the ELDs coming into play here, where all this data is being collected. It doesn't take that much more work to automate the analysis to monitor for consistency.
Let me ask my co-host a question.
This guy over here.
All right. So, Johnny, you got all this telematics data coming in, but the company don't do nothing with it.
Mm-hmm.
How does the insurance industry look at that?
Oh, yeah, with a big frown, really quickly, big frown. I think insurance companies would just be in awe of what's going on here with this study and the information that can be gleaned from it. The new challenge is going to be, how do I get that motor carrier on board to get monitoring this information, do something with this information, act on this information? So that becomes the next challenge of, well, how do we get motor carriers to utilize this data and do something with it?
Well, that's probably a good question for Ward. How do motor carriers, how can they capture it, analyze it, and then use it?
Yeah. Well, the data is already being captured automatically with the ELDs. And but as John was saying, how many are really looking at it and utilizing it to the extent they could. But I'm glad you're bringing up the question about bringing up the discussion around insurance, because I think that there is as much benefit, if not more benefit, to the insurance folks than there is to the fleets. And we could probably have a separate interview just on that. But what it does is it opens up the door to behavior-based monitoring in a significant way. And a couple other things is it doesn't matter what kind of telematics devices you have in your fleet. You're looking at consistency, wherever that data is coming from. Right. And you're not necessarily needing to have a benchmark across the board. You're looking at what that fleet does today and whether their behavior is consistent or not. So so really coming back to your question, what does it take or what can it take to get fleets on board? Well, if you get insurers recognizing the value of this, then they go in and they rate a fleet. They want to make sure that that fleet does not turn around and become unsafe. And this is a tool that ensures that fleets aren't going in the wrong direction, and it has benefit to the insurer. I mean, it's protecting the margins. And for a fleet, it's hopefully not seeing as great an increase as their neighbor are getting with insurance, because we all know what's still going on.
Yeah. Well, you've got lots of regulations that are out there. So taking ELDs as an example was imposed on us by the U.S. back in 2018. And now we got Canadian coming into place with electronic logging devices as well. So there's no reason why an insurance company can't impose on a motor carrier to say, hey, you want insurance through us, you need to be managing this data. You need to show us that you have consistency within your fleet. And I like the fact that what you said, we don't have to necessarily measure against our peers. We measure against what's going on within the fleet. How can we manage that and bring that down? Then maybe after a while, the insurance provider could start measuring one fleet against another and find out, wow, these guys are performing better. Let's find out what it is they're doing so we can share that information with these other carriers to help them raise the bar.
Yeah, good point, Johnny. Roger, when we're talking about consistency, are we talking about the fleet or are we talking about the individual driver?
We're talking about the individual driver.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a scorecard type instrument.
Yes. So how is that driver doing versus his or her historical driving record? Not in terms of accidents or anything like that, but just in terms of how fast they drive and how much harsh braking they do, et cetera.
That's cool. Ward, of course, Fleetmetrica. How can fleets put this into practice? Let's say it that way.
I just want to build on the response that Roger just gave. Consistency isn't just the responsibility of the driver. You see it at the driver level. It's kind of like billing errors. You get billing errors in trucking companies, but they may occur when someone's rating the load or the driver's putting in their reports. Consistency. A driver being able to maintain consistency may have more to do with how they're trained and how they're coached, or it may have more to do with the equipment that's being purchased or maintained, or just the hiring. There are a lot of influences beyond the driver that are important, and so you need to take care in how you're acting on this information. And so what Fleetmetrica does is it makes sense of all that data for you. So the drivers, anyone can see what their responsibility is in this process in terms of taking action. At a driver level, at a driver supervisor level, even a terminal or owner level. Everyone has responsibility for what happens in terms of over-road performance. And we just make it easy for people to make sense of that data. And of course, we monitor high-risk drivers, but we also monitor the consistency of drivers. So that's already built into our methodology. So we've already have automated that for fleets.
Yeah, I can see where this is a great opportunity for those that are not measuring consistency, not utilizing this data, and a lot of them going, I don't know why I'm having crashes. I don't know why these guys are crashing all the time. I don't know what's going on. But we start utilizing this data. Now we can implement corrective actions where we have data that points us in the right direction now where we can develop training to prevent these and correct these behaviors and move on past these. So, hey, we don't have these type of crashes anymore because we've recognized what the common denominators are and we just don't have them anymore. We've corrected them. Great, bonus, move on, next one. So I think this is great to be able to utilize this information. So now management, operations, staff, safety, maintenance, everybody gets involved with how everybody performs.
Yeah, and it's important to highlight, I think, what Ward said. It's not necessarily the driver that's inconsistent. Right. It could be influenced by dispatch, customer demands, all kinds of other stuff that are in there. So when you develop the training, it may not be driver training. It may be an influencer training.
Sure. Well, and you could have new drivers coming on board this company, and it's like, I've never hauled this kind of freight before. I've never pulled this type of trailer before. So now all of a sudden, my consistencies start to become inconsistent with how I'm performing with this type of equipment. Like you said, the runs, the travel lanes, and whatnot.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just, if I could jump in, it's not just the level and who's accountable, different levels, but different areas of the business and different fleet divisions that are generating different results over the road that are important to monitor. Yeah, absolutely.
Roger, I think you had a comment.
Well, I was just going to affirm what you were saying a little bit earlier. And this could be scheduling. If a driver is scheduled to deliver more than usual and has to go faster than usual or take, corners faster or something, then, that could be causing accidents. And you could, we don't see that in the data. What we see is the driving inconsistency, but we don't know what's driving that, if you will. So there's some of the things that the data can tell us is very powerful, but there's a lot that's not in there as well. So we have to recognize the strengths and the weaknesses of what the data is telling us.
Well, but at the same time, having that data, though, helps us to start looking at other areas to find out, do the investigation portion, right? The data that's not being exposed gives us now the opportunity to go, okay, we have the smoking gun. We need to figure out how the trigger got pulled, right? So that approach can be applied there. So we dig back. So like you say, maybe it's a scheduling issue. Okay, well, let's start talking with everybody about how the scheduling is. And because I actually had a situation arise with a customer not long ago where they were having a driver that was complaining about the scheduling. And it was funny because it had nothing to do with the way the operations had set up the scheduling process. Everything should work bang, bang, bang. The problem was maintenance. Because every day, every time he came in to get his truck, it was tied up in the maintenance bay getting an inspection or service work or a tire change, stuff that the other driver that used it before had found, but they weren't getting completed in a timely manner. So now this driver is starting behind the 8 ball right off the bat, and he's rush. And it was causing, he'd have some violations. It was showing up as speeding violations on his data. And one resulted in a small minor crash. And he was under pressure to perform because of maintenance and their screw up and not telling operations who could have taken and said, okay, well, hang on, we can push out these timelines so you don't have to rush to get there. But there was no communication. So.
And I like the discussion around actions, John, because unless someone's actually taking actions, the situation doesn't change. And
exactly.
And if you are able to make it easy enough to make sense of all this data, you're not wasting your time playing with data. You're more value added at retraining drivers or finding out what's going on in that operations or maintenance area that's contributing to these issues.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, been in the trucking industry long enough, you hear the stories from drivers, and a lot of people dismiss it as, he's whining, he's complaining, don't worry about it. Well, if I had data to back it up, I'd be going, hang on, there's some legitimacy to his complaint, and now we've got some data to back it up, and now we can go backwards to figure out how to correct it.
Exactly.
Roger?
Right. Yeah, these studies are great in terms of what they can tell us, but they always raise numerous questions that we want to say, I wish I had the data to answer this question or that question. Just the kind of thing you were mentioning. And so I think Ward's got another study in mind for sometime this year. But, there are additional questions that always come up and you say, I wish I had more data, or I wish I had looked at something differently or a different company. And, just always more things to do and more that we can find out.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to learn about the other metrics, we one of the challenges we find is we didn't have enough telematics data to really determine whether it had an impact on accidents. And as we collect more data over time, we're able to analyze more of those metrics. And now that we're coming up with things like distraction events, where we're only seeing in cab videos more recently, we don't have enough data to build models or test it around that. Another area that we'd like to study is actually tying this closer to loss ratios and bringing that data in, so that as an insurer you can tie that risk to a bottom line.
Yep,
that's interesting. Sure. Now, Ward, you've got a white paper. Is that the right word for it? That would be available for people who want to know more.
Yeah, so there's a white paper on just scorecards themselves, what's involved in best practices in implementing scorecards, and obviously monitoring as it relates to this study, Chris. The important tips from that white paper are it's important to provide feedback to all of your drivers, not just those drivers that are high risk. Give everyone the opportunity to provide feedback and to provide actionable information, not just, hey, here's how I'm doing, but look out for this or congratulations on that. And so those are some examples of tips that are in that white paper.
Right, and of course that's on your website, right? And
yes, it is.
Yeah, and we're going to put a link in the show notes below so that anybody who wants a copy of that can get it easily, right?
Great.
Roger, thanks so much for coming on the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast.
My pleasure.
Hey, Ward, my friend.
I just want to add one more comment here for the viewers to realize most people think statisticians are boring people. And I just want them to realize Roger's not that, because if you'd been paying attention, there was some data provided during this meeting. This man goes skiing with his grandchildren. That's not boring. That's dangerous. Did you do a study on that before you got into it? Make sure the left ski and right ski were in the right position?
I didn't have enough data for that. Sorry.
Okay, well, sometimes you just got to test it to see what happens, right?
Beautiful.
Right.
Ward, awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And what a great interview. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Ward of Fleetmetrica. If you would like to get a copy of this white paper, let me just show it to you here. If you would like to get your own copy of the white paper, click on the link in the show notes down below, and Ward will be happy to send it to you. He's done a great job in really reducing the content of this study to a few short pages. I really know you're going to enjoy it. So click on the link down below. And thanks again, Roger and Ward. Trip. Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast, and we are your hosts, John Farquhar and myself, Mr. Harris. All right, and for this week, we are out of here.